10-0 Sports Central will be going over our next final prediction of this offseason, and it will be over quite possibly the biggest surprise team of the 2019 season. That was the Minnesota Golden Gophers, and yeah, this team was 11-2 last season. All around, just a great season for Minnesota. I mean, I think this is their first 11-win season that they've had in a very long time. It's been a lot. It's been a really long time since Minnesota's been able to be this good, and today we're going to be going over whether or not they can make it to the Big Ten Championship and win their division, as well as a possible college football playoff appearance. We're going to be going over the reason as to why that could happen, and also we're going to be going over your returning production, along with a full preview and prediction on Minnesota's schedule. So with that, let's look at your season trends from 2019 for this team. Of course, they were undefeated for a very long time, and the schedule set up really well for this team. I mean, they were undefeated all the way through November, and yeah, they were 3-2 between November and the postseason. That's where their 2 losses came from, but once again, all around, just a great season for Minnesota. I mean, they were undefeated for a long time there. And honestly, when I was looking at this Minnesota team at the middle of last season, I was thinking they were totally going to flop. Like, I didn't think that they'd hardly even get a win in their November. But it turns out they got their major win in November against Penn State. So, yeah, this team definitely was, I mean, they were a really great team last season. And, of course, they got a very young team as well. You can't forget about that. I mean, this team was not expected to be all that good last season. Of course, when I predicted this team last offseason, I think I predicted them to go, I think it was 8-4. So, yeah, I kind of missed it. I didn't think Minnesota was going to be as good as they were, but certainly was a great surprise for Minnesota fans. Your key wins from last season: you beat Illinois on October 5th, 40-17, and don't forget Illinois was a bowl team last season. Then your major win, your signature win of the season, was against Penn State, 31-26. That's really showed me that that win there was really what showed me that Minnesota was for real. And yeah, they had a big win over Northwestern as well, 38-22, and then they beat Auburn in their bowl game, I believe the Outback Bowl, 31-24, and that was another major win. I mean, Auburn is a great team, and being under the SEC, I mean, that was a great win for Minnesota, and just a great finish off of a great season for Minnesota all around. As far as your returning production goes, you return your starting quarterback, Tanner Morgan, and I expect him to be a big quarterback next season, one of the best in the nation. I mean, looking at his stats from last season, he came out of nowhere with 3,200 yards with 30 touchdowns and 7 interceptions. He also had a 66% completion rate, which overall, those are some really good stats. I mean, especially his touchdown and interception ratio with a 30-7. That's just over a 4-1. So, yeah, very impressive by Tanner Morgan last season. No one was really expecting him to do what he did, and I mean, a 66% completion rate's also really good. I mean, that still is a percentage that he could definitely improve going into next season, but that still is all around a great completion rate. And as far as the running back core goes, you lose your top one in Rodney Smith, which, yeah, that's going to be a pretty tough loss. He had just right around 1,200 yards with 8 touchdowns last season. So Rodney Smith was a big part of this team last season, and that's going to be a tough one to lose for this offense. But at least they do return their second running back in Muhammad Ibrahim, which he had just over 600 yards with 7 touchdowns last season. So, yeah, he didn't have as many stats or as many yards that Rodney Smith had, but he still had a decent amount for me to believe that he could definitely lead this running back core well. As far as the receiving core goes, you lose your top receiver in Tyler Johnson, and of course, he was another wide receiver that was just really good last season, came out of absolute nowhere with 1,300 yards with 13 touchdowns last season, and they had a second really good receiver with Rashad Bateman as well. The good thing is for Minnesota, they are returning him. And yeah, Rashad Bateman had 1,200 yards with 11 touchdowns last season. So yeah, those two receivers were really good last season. And considering, I mean, they were able to put up 2,500 yards combined, I mean, yeah, very impressive for Minnesota. And it's going to be tough for them to lose Tyler Johnson. But once again, at least you got a receiver that's just as good as Tyler Johnson and Rashad Bateman coming back to this team for next season. So yeah, I expect a lot of big things out of Rashad Bateman especially. I think he could definitely be one of the best, if not the best, wide receiver in the Big Ten next season. I mean, for him to put up 1,200 yards and still have a year of eligibility and still a year of college to play at Minnesota, and especially with him having his quarterback back, I think he's definitely going to put up some major stats next season. Watch out for Rashad Bateman. They return all of their other main receivers as well. Of course, I mean, last season, Tyler Johnson and Rashad Bateman just about were the only major receivers for this team last season, but they do return, of course, Chris Ottman-Bell, so that's going to be good as well. But he did not put up near as many yards as Tyler Johnson or Rashad Bateman did. Of course, he had just right around 400 yards with 5 touchdowns last season. So, yeah, he didn't have all that big of an impact on this team last season, but once again, expect big things out of Rashad Bateman going into next season. As far as the offensive line goes, you lose one on there, and then you also lose one defensive lineman and one linebacker. and you also lose 2 in the secondary. So the defense really is not losing all that much as well. I mean, only losing 4 starters, that's right around average. So, yeah, for Minnesota, I wouldn't really worry about the defense all that much. But, I mean, with the offensive line, too, only 1 loss on there. Yeah, this Minnesota team is for real. And I think next season, I mean, especially if Tanner Morgan's able to keep up with what he did last season, I mean, this team could definitely put up some big damage in the Big Ten the next season. And, I mean, yeah, they could definitely beat out Wisconsin, I think, for that division. I mean, that Big Ten West division was wide open last season, and it's wide open this season as well. I mean, you got several teams that could win that division, and yeah, I mean, leading the pack for that would be Minnesota, and you got Wisconsin in there as well. Same with Iowa. I mean, you could put in Nebraska in there as well. So you got several teams in that Big Ten West division that you got to worry about, and I think Minnesota definitely is right next to Wisconsin for my favorite to win that division next season. I mean, both of those teams are going to be very good, and Minnesota, I mean, that game against Wisconsin when they played this season is going to be huge. Chances of winning the Big Ten West, though, I would say are pretty high for Minnesota. I mean, they're definitely right up there with one of the best chances, I think, to win the division next season. And is Minnesota a national contender? That's another question you got to answer for this team. I mean, they had 11 wins last season, so, and considering how good of returning production that they have, I mean, this team could easily be a national contender next season. I mean, it's crazy to think that Minnesota, of all teams, could be a national contender out of absolute nowhere. But with PJ Fleck in there, he's doing a great job. I mean, all around, he's really turned around this Minnesota program. I mean, if you look back, I mean, 5-10 years ago, this team was absolutely just horrible. And so, I mean, to see them improve as much as they have, I mean, this team is for real. And I think Minnesota definitely could be a team that, I mean, many teams need to watch out for next season. And there's a good chance that this team, I mean, especially if they face off against Ohio State in the Big Ten championship, they could make it to the college football playoff. I mean, honestly, if the Big Ten West champion, whoever wins out the Big Ten West will likely play, I mean, either Ohio State or Penn State. And if they can win the Big Ten championship, I mean, they should have an automatic bid to the college football playoff. So really for Minnesota, it is not all that tough of a trip. I mean, as long as you can get past Ohio State or Penn State. But yeah, in the end, is Minnesota a national contender for next season? I definitely think they are. I mean, you just can't take any bad losses down the stretch. And I think Minnesota definitely is a contender to watch out for. As far as your schedule looks, you start off the season against Florida Atlantic on September 3rd, and then you got a game against Tennessee Tech on the 12th. So your first couple weeks are looking pretty easy. Then you got your first conference game against Iowa on the 18th. Watch out for that one. That's going to be an important game. And, of course, Iowa destroyed Minnesota's hopes of making the playoff last season. I mean, Minnesota was right up there with Penn State. I mean, after they beat Penn State, this team was in the top 10, I believe. And, yeah, they were knocking on the door of the college football playoff. And, yeah, Iowa kind of shredded that for them. But, yeah, that's going to be a big game there either way. Iowa definitely could be a sneaky team in that Big Ten West division next season. You got BYU on the 26th, big game there as well. To make sure you got to win that one, especially if you're going to win your division. And as far as October goes, you got lots of road games. I mean, 4 of your 5 games in October are on the road, and you got Maryland and Wisconsin to start off your month. You got Michigan at home, and then you got 2 more road games against Illinois and Michigan State. So that October could be a tough month. But as far as your November goes, you play Purdue, you got a bye week, then you play Northwestern, and then you got Nebraska on the road to finish off your season. Yeah, so with that, let's look at your September. I think you're going to go 4-0 through September. And, yeah, I kind of went back and forth on that Iowa game. I mean, you could definitely go either way with that. But, yeah, I'm going to give Minnesota 4 wins here. I think you blow past Florida Atlantic, Tennessee Tech, and BYU pretty easily. I think the Iowa game is going to be close. Watch out for that. But I think Minnesota pulls out the win in the end. And a big reason for that is because they're going to be at home. And as far as your October looks, then, I think that you do take a loss in your October. But otherwise, I think you get a couple of big wins in this month. I mean, considering you're on the road for 4 out of 5 weeks in October, I mean, that could trip up Minnesota quite a bit. But I think they only take 1 loss in this month, and that is to Wisconsin in Camp Randall. And, of course, that's always a really tough place to play in general. And Wisconsin, once again, I mentioned before, that game is going to be huge. Very impactful to both teams. And the unfortunate thing for Minnesota next season is that they have to play Wisconsin on the road. I mean, if Minnesota had them at home, that would help them a ton. But Wisconsin, I think, in the end, is the better team. They've got more talent. I think Wisconsin gets the win at home. I mean, I could go either way on that one for sure, and that's going to be a very impactful game. But in the end, I think Wisconsin being at home, and I mean, these two teams, Minnesota and Wisconsin, I think have very similar talent, if not the same. So, I mean, both teams are going to be very evenly matched there. It's just Wisconsin being at home, and I can imagine it might be a night game as well. I mean, that's going to be a major game, so watch out for that. But Yeah, in the end, I do think you get a win the next week against Michigan. That's going to be a big win. That's going to be a big game in general there. If you lose to Michigan there, that could definitely set a bad tone for the last few weeks. But I think you get a win against Michigan, and I think you get 2 close wins against Illinois and Michigan State on the road. So, yeah, you come out of your October, it's going to be a bumpy October, but I think you get out of there 8-1. So you're still looking at a really good record heading into your November, and I think Minnesota at this point in the season could easily be ranked in the top 15. And I mean, if they do beat out Wisconsin, who knows? This team could be undefeated heading into your November, which your November does not look all that tough. But here's what I'm expecting. I'll give you 2 easy wins against Purdue and Northwestern. And you guys might get mad at me for this one, but that Nebraska game on the 27th, I think trips up Minnesota. I think this Minnesota team, I mean, they could easily go 11-1 through this season, but I think that Nebraska team, Nebraska last season, I mean, if you look at that Nebraska team over the past couple of seasons, they've kind of started off quite slow. I mean, if you look back, especially in, I think it was 2018, that team was like 0-6 at the start, but they improved a ton over the season. And if that trend continues, I think Nebraska could be playing their best ball at the end of the season, and they could be an opponent very similar to Iowa. And, of course, Nebraska's got a great home field advantage as well. So I think Nebraska trips up Minnesota there, and Nebraska gets a win there to finish off the season. But, yeah, still in the end, I think Minnesota goes 10-2 and in the regular season next year. And, of course, I mean, that's not a bad record at all. I mean, that's pretty much kind of similar to how it was last season, but still, I mean, for Minnesota, I mean, this is probably the best case scenario. I mean, Wisconsin is going to be a tough game, and I mean, Michigan's going to be tough in there as well. But yeah, in the end, I think Minnesota, give or take, goes 10-2. I mean, you could take a couple of losses. I think Minnesota definitely has a good chance of winning the division. But I mean, as far as Wisconsin goes, I think in my prediction video, I gave them a 10-2 record as well. So I do have Wisconsin winning the division, I believe, for this season. But in the end, I think it's still going to be very close. But yeah, once again, I mean, that Wisconsin game is going to be very, very impactful for both teams. I mean, both teams are going to really want to win that one. I mean, that could easily decide the Big Ten West at the end of the day. So you got to watch out for that. But yeah, once again, that about wraps up our prediction on Minnesota for the upcoming season. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below on Minnesota. I'd like to hear your record predictions as well as your game predictions. But yeah, in the end, thanks again for watching. Be sure to stay tuned for more content from All Sports Central. If you enjoyed this preview, be sure to slap a like on it and subscribe as well. It really helps out the channel, and I'd really appreciate that. But as always, thanks again for watching. Stay tuned for more, and I will see you all later.